Hello and welcome. In this video, we shall be talking about event loop in JavaScript, and we are going to answer all the common questions that confuse everyone. So if you hadn't heard already, JavaScript is single-threaded. That means that it could only process one task at a time. If it's executing a loop, for example, if we have a loop from 1 to, for example, 1 million, 0 I is smaller than 1. Okay, I think that's how you write a million. Anyway, if we have a loop that looks like this, JavaScript is going to execute this complete loop, and we would not be able to execute anything else while this is executing the loop. This can result in occasions where the browser is completely frozen, it hangs and simply showing the loading indicator, and you are unable to do anything. This can also happen when you are visiting a website that makes heavy use of JavaScript. So the question is, when JavaScript is waiting for 0.5 seconds to console log this statement, is it going to console log this one first, or it's going to console log this one first? If it's going to console.log this one first, how is this statement going to execute? As this statement must wait 500 milliseconds, and as we discussed already, JavaScript is single threaded. It couldn't just start two different threads and then execute this one, and then in the second thread wait until 500 milliseconds pass so it can console.log this. Basically, as you might guess, I'm great at making things look confusing. However, let's simplify that code a bit, and then we are going to move on to the whiteboard. I'm going to create a function. Let's name that run, and here I'm going to say console.log I'm 0.5 ms late. Let's move this function to the top of the file. Next, we are going to call this function in our set timeout. And finally, we have our console.log. So the way this code executes is, let's move this to whiteboard and walk through this step by step. Um, there we go. This is our code. Let's also make some space for our console. I'm going to write console here. Let's consider that this is our console. Just a bit smaller. There we go. And finally, let's consider that this is our memory, the RAM, the memory that we are using to store our variables and functions. And this is the browser engine. This is what's going on inside the browser engine when we run any code. So first of all, when a code starts running, this function is executed and it creates a new function called run in the memory. So it looks something like, let's say, run. That's a function that takes no arguments and returns nothing. So it's what it's look like. Next, it moves on to the set timeout statement where we execute our run method. And what set timeout does it doesn't execute in JavaScript. Instead, it asks the browser engine to remind us in 500 milliseconds. Obviously, I'm oversimplifying it, but in the browser, there's something called base message runner, message loop, and base task runner. Again, that's an oversimplification, but there's something in the browser engine called task runner that we just tell to ping us in 500 milliseconds. So we just tell the browser to kind of ping us in 500 milliseconds, and the browser creates a timer, simply creates a timer for 500 milliseconds, and it stores the reference of this run method in memory. And then we move on. We know that the browser will ping us in 500 milliseconds. We don't need to worry about running this run method. We just move on to the next line, where we just need to console.log a hello statement on the console. So we are going to go ahead and console.log it. Let me add a line here as well. Nope, that just makes it look more confusing. I'm just going to make console bigger. Can I make that bold? Nope, I cannot. Let's just give it a size of 35. That makes it look better. And now after 500 milliseconds, this timer triggers, and then it creates a queue. There's a queue in the browser, something like this, and it simply pushes this run method onto the queue. So this might be getting confusing, that's because it is. But there's a queue in the browser that contains all the methods to run. If we have 4 timers firing at once, it's going to add 4 methods to this queue. And then we have something called our task loop or event loop, which is going to pick each method of this queue and then execute it. So that thing, the event loop or task loop, it runs, it picks this run method, removes it from the queue, and then executes it. And then after the 500 milliseconds, we are going to see I am 0.5, not milliseconds, seconds, sorry. I am 0.5 seconds late. Let's take another example to understand it better. I am going to go back and change that to 0 milliseconds. And now, which method do you think that's going to execute first? Let's go back to the whiteboard and try that out as well. The concept is very simple. We are going to create the same layout. We have our console, our memory, the browser engine. I'm going to add console there, and then memory there, and then browser engine there. So first of all, a run method is going to get called, it's going to get parsed, and this is going to create a run method in the memory. Next, we are going to call our set timeout statement, and just like we learned before, this is going to create a new timer in the browser engine for 0 seconds, which should run the run method. We tell it to execute the run method in 0 milliseconds. And obviously the 0 milliseconds timer fires immediately, and our queue gets our first object, which is run. However, even though we have an object in our queue, we cannot run this method yet. As we are already executing code, like we discussed previously, JavaScript is single threaded, it cannot do two things at once. Even the event loop is single threaded, it's not going to execute two methods at once, and it's already executing our main code. So it cannot execute the run method yet, and it's going to move on and go to the console.log and print hello to the console. Next, now our event loop is free. It can move on to do other things, and it's going to look at our queue, and it sees, well, we have a run method. It's going to remove that and then execute a run method again. And now inside the browser we are going to print I am 0 seconds late. And that's pretty much it. That's how the event loop works. If we take a summarized example, when a code begins executing, the browser simply creates a queue and then it adds our code. Let's add it a little bit to the right. Let's say our file name, our code is inside the index.html file. So it's going to store something like index.html. We have a script that we need to execute. And what it does is it's going to pick this script and starts executing it. And once it encounters a set timeout or an AJAX call or maybe a set interval, it's just going to tell the browser to kind of ping us in this much time. And once this timer fires, we are going to get another object added to our queue. Similarly, if we have three different script tags, the browser is going to add all three script tags to our queue, and which one gets added first depends a bit on the browser, but generally the first script is going to run first. If you have an script inside the head tag, it's going to run before something which is just before the body tag ends. Now, once all three scripts have executed, it's going to maybe look for an AJAX call, it's going to look for a set timeout, it's going to look for an interval, any code that we need to execute, and it's going to execute that. An example of this are AJAX calls. If we have something like const res equals to await, let's take an AJAX example just to clarify that. I am going to create a function, async function get data, return fetch https / example.com, and then here we have maybe console.log, something like get data dot then data equals to console.log. We can actually simplify that to just console.log and it's going to print our data. And then we go, let's try putting that after it, console.log fetching data. And this code is also going to follow a very simple path. It's going to reach this point and then it's going to call our AJAX. However, it's not going to wait until the URL returns or errors. It's just going to tell the browser to, well, ping me when the AJAX call responds, and then it's going to move on. If we have 10 AJAX calls, it's going to tell the browser to ping us back, and then it's going to move on without waiting for the call to actually return. And that's basically how the event loop works. The browser keeps moving and moving. It looks for code to execute, it executes it, and then it looks for more code to execute, and if there's no code to execute anymore, it just waits.